Some habits are small enough that nobody notices them happening until they stop, and then suddenly everyone notices. Not because the action itself was remarkable, but because something quietly depended on it. There was someone who always closed the gates. Not dramatically, not with a sense of duty that needed announcing, just a simple motion at the end of passing through, a hand reaching back, a latch settling into place. At first, nobody thought much about it. Gates are meant to close, lights are meant to turn off, chairs are meant to return to their tables. Things simply return to order. But over time, people began to notice something strange. Whenever this person had been somewhere before them, small things were already taken care of. A gate that might have swung open in the wind was secured. A tap that might have been left dripping was turned off. A chair that might have been blocking a walkway had been nudged back into place. Nothing important exactly, nothing anyone would praise, just a quiet restoration of the ordinary. The interesting part was that nobody had asked them to do it. There was no job description for it, no list of responsibilities, no reward waiting at the end of the day. They simply noticed things, and when something looked unfinished, they finished it. When something looked slightly out of place, they adjusted it. When something looked like it might cause a problem later, they prevented it. It wasn't perfectionism. It wasn't control. It was something gentler than that. A small instinct toward completion. Most of the time it went entirely unseen. People walked through the gate without thinking about who had closed it before them. They enjoyed the working tap without wondering who had tightened it. They moved through tidy spaces without asking who had quietly restored them. That is the nature of maintenance. When it works, it disappears. Creation is visible. People see buildings being built, meals being cooked, projects being launched. New things attract attention because they change the world in obvious ways. Maintenance, on the other hand, preserves the world quietly. It keeps things from drifting too far from where they belong. But because the result looks normal, simply the way things are meant to be, it rarely draws attention. For a long time, nobody noticed the person who closed the gates. Not because people were ungrateful, because there was nothing to thank. Everything simply worked. Then one day the person wasn't there. It wasn't dramatic. They hadn't moved away. They hadn't announced anything. They were simply absent for a while. And slowly the ordinary began to unravel in small ways. A gate left swinging in the wind, a light left burning all afternoon, a chair pushed halfway into a walkway, a tap dripping into the quiet of the evening. None of it was serious. No disasters followed. No one stood in the middle of the road wondering what had happened. But the environment felt slightly unfinished, as though the room had exhaled but nobody had closed the window. Someone noticed the gate first. Wasn't this usually shut? Another person shrugged and pulled it closed behind them. Later someone noticed the light. Oh, that must have been left on. They flicked the switch and continued their day. Then someone noticed the chairs, then the dripping tap, then the small trail of unfinished things. It wasn't irritation that appeared, it was curiosity. Who normally does these things? Someone asked. And the strange part was that nobody knew. People began looking back through their routines, trying to remember, trying to identify the quiet hand that had been maintaining the edges of their shared space. Eventually someone said the obvious. Oh, the one who always closes the gates. It sounded almost like a nickname. Not unkind, just accurate. The person had never introduced themselves that way. They had never said, I am the one who restores the small things. They had simply done it. When they returned, nothing dramatic happened. No speeches, no apologies, no sudden appreciation ceremony. But something subtle had shifted. People noticed the gate closing now. The small motion of the hand reaching back, the quiet click of the latch. Someone even said, once half-jokingly, You always close the gates. The person smiled, not proudly, just acknowledging the observation. I suppose I do, they said. The truth was they had never really thought about it as a role. It was simply the way their attention worked. Their eyes lingered on unfinished things. Their mind liked quiet completion. Where some people see movement, opportunity, or conversation, some people see the edges of systems, the points where small neglect can slowly turn into inconvenience. And when they notice those edges, they fix them, not for praise, not even for recognition, simply because it feels easier to finish the motion than to leave it undone. There is a certain personality that moves through the world this way, not loudly improving things, not redesigning systems, just quietly maintaining the environment around them. They close the gates, they switch off the lights, they straighten the chairs, they return things to their place. If you ask them why, they might struggle to answer, because the motivation isn't dramatic. It's simply a preference for the world feeling complete. And yet, entire systems quietly depend on people like this. Homes, workplaces, communities, shared spaces, not because these places would collapse without them, but because the small frictions of daily life would slowly accumulate. Dripping taps, open gates, forgotten switches, unfinished gestures. It's strange how invisible this kind of care can be, because care is often imagined as something emotional or expressive, something that looks like effort, something that announces itself. But sometimes care looks like something smaller, something so ordinary it disappears. A gate closing behind someone who already walked through. And if the person who closed the gates ever stopped doing it entirely, the world would not fall apart. People would adjust, others would step in. Eventually, someone else would notice the small unfinished things. But there would always be a quiet moment of realization first. The moment when someone sees the open gate moving in the wind and thinks, someone used to close this. Which leaves the question hanging, not inside the story, but outside it, with you. Do you tend to notice the small unfinished things around you, or move past them easily? When someone quietly maintains shared spaces, do we recognize that as care? Are small acts of maintenance less meaningful simply because they are expected? And how much of the world quietly depends on people who close the gates?